Hello and welcome to the Orbiting Brick, and today's video, as you can see, this rocket looks off in several ways. I'm using the mod Old Parts Redux, which re-adds many of the old models and textures of some of the parts in Kerbal Space Program. And also, for some reason, I wasn't able to uninstall Restock, and I break too many things, so the twin-bore mammoths still have the modern textures. Sorry about that. But yes, I decided why not mess around with these old parts and see how different it is. And also, I'm using the same mod solar system, so New Horizons system, and so we're gonna be going to Aperture. Since Kerbal is a moon of the gas giant Sona, Aperture is another moon of Sona, and it's actually a very similar orbit to Kerbal. In fact, this mission will only be 4 days. 2 days to Aperture and 2 days back to Kerbal. But right now we're launching the Lander and transfer stage. You saw the boosters in there. And besides the twin-bore mammoth, there are a few other parts that still have their modern textures. Mainly the decouplers, and later you'll see heat shields. Yeah, all these parts should hopefully have had these models at around the same time. I tried to aim for before 2015, so these parts look like this over 10 years ago now. Yeah, there may have been some mistakes, there might be some parts that just aren't supposed to, that didn't look that way at the same time. So sorry if that did happen. Anyways, yeah, you saw the first core stage, and in the second stage, using a... Okay, well, this version of the Rhino, I use it because so the Rhino was updated more recently, but that more recent model gets changed by Restock. So I use the older model that shouldn't coexist with these other part models I'm using. I probably butchered that, but basically the Rhino was too old for the rest of the parts. Anyways, yeah, you saw the transfer stage and lander there, using some asparagus staging. Now, the crew capsule, using the iconic old Mark 1-3 command pod. And not the classic parachute, I'm using parachutes from Real Shoot instead. And where I'm using that because we need a docking port. Yeah, and of course, there's also some parts from some mods here. Some mainly stuff from USI mods. USI life support, and also some random solar panels I found in USI. They fit with the art style. And also, I believe the variant of the wing that I'm using there on the first stage, that also might be too old for the rest of the parts. Anyways, regardless of that, I was able to achieve the aesthetic I was going for. And now we've just introduced our stages, and are burning quite possibly what, in my opinion, is one of the 2 worst parts ever added to this game. I guess worst looking. It's the old poodle. I'd never experienced it whilst it still had this model of stock. I don't understand why anyone would think that this is what an engine should look like. Of course, the old Mark III cockpit definitely still does look worse. I decided not to go with using that since I really don't want to deal with building a plane. Anyways, we're doing our rendezvous. We have dealt with the despair, so I'm doing it inefficiently. I just burned so that our orbital period would match up, so it would intersect the target around here at periapsis. Fairly high relative velocity, but we're able to kill that off. Also, I believe it's probably a bug with Vapor Cones mod, since for a while now there's just been random smoke below the spacecraft. I'll have to reinstall that and try and fix that. But yeah, normal rendezvous. Not much to really say. We're now slowly approaching the target. And also, these parts aren't configured for engine igniter, so I don't need to worry about alleged ignitions, which does feel more authentic to how this more authentic to the older aesthetic, I guess. Well, I guess that's my justification for it. But yeah, it meant I again didn't need as much water repellent, which if you saw in the last video, that's definitely good. And I actually did this as separate install, obviously. Well, not separate install, I mean separate save file. Because I still don't really know what I'm gonna do about those stranded Kerbals. Anyways, going back to the mission at hand, we can then dock the two spacecraft. And we can also transfer some fuel over into the command module to compensate for the fuel we expended. And now the combined spacecraft is ready to head off to Aperture. And for this, we will plot our maneuver for that. There we go. So yeah, not actually the cheapest maneuver, since I found it surprisingly hard to get encounters with Aperture. Yeah, this will be a multi-stage burn. There goes the Rhino stage, and now we're burning yet another Poodle engine. And this is the Asparagus stage you saw earlier. This is a fairly long burn, isn't it? But we already just in the first set of Asparagus fuel tanks. And I finished the burn using the second set. So now we need to perform a mid-course correction to adjust our inclination and get a nice close encounter with Aperture. There we go. And I believe I actually turned down the thrust limiter on the Poodle there, which would cause issues later on. Because now we approach Aperture, we're going to need to conduct our capture burn. And both the stock game and Kerbal Engineer readouts would disagree on when I would need to start burning, and I would mess up anyways. I just want to quickly check that I wasn't going to encounter the surface unexpectedly, because Aperture, as you can see, it's similar to a stock ghillie. Well, at least if it's not just a black shape in the distance, and you can see on the map view it's similar to ghillie, a very evenly shaped asteroid. So there's a chance for gliding with it in seemingly safe orbits. But so far we seem good, and you can see that the burn time seems off. I'll start burning anyways, but then I'll open the Kerbal Engineer readouts. And once I do that, I'll see that I'm actually not supposed to start burning until 2 minutes from now. So I'll time warp anyway. I'll time warp pretty soon. And I'll overshoot the burn by about 10 seconds. And I believe the thrust limiter is still turned down on the engine. So yeah, we're going to overshoot the burn. Well, I guess not exactly overshoot, just very poorly execute the burn. And we're not gonna end up on a circular orbit like I planned. There go the second set of Asparagus fuel tanks. And yeah, you can see we're nowhere near the expected trajectory. I'll try and do some stuff with radio out / radio in, and that'll only make it worse. Thankfully we have plenty of Delta V to spare. Now we capture into a very eccentric orbit that actually intersects the surface, so we raise our periapsis here. You can get a far better view of Aperture now. And now we can lower our apoapsis. And there I finally turn up the thrust limiter on the engine. And something I guess I didn't mention earlier is this mod keeps all the just weird decisions made in the making of these parts. Such as how the old Mark 1-3 command pod, despite having RCS thrusters on the model, does not have actual RCS thrusters, so you need to use separate RCS blocks. Yeah, we are now in a circular orbit. Fairly soon, two Kerbals can transfer over into the lander. And if the command module can undock. And now the orbit burn can begin. Very narrowly missing the command pod there. But we're able to start descending. And again, Aperture is like Gilly, it's a very small celestial body, so it's very easy to land on it. So we're going to burn this stage until we're about 100 meters off the surface, then we'll detach and use the lander for the rest of the descent. Actually, they had the nav ball set to orbit there instead of surface. But there we go. And now we'll just end this lower stage. And deploying the landing legs. And hopefully come to a safe stop. As the lower stage explodes below us, and some debris starts rolling down the hillside. Now we land safely on a very steep slope. And now, for some reason, this command pod, or lander can I guess, it's fully compatible with a free IVA despite it being very old. It also has some IVA additions from, I believe that'd be, well, there's multiple mods that change IVAs, so I don't remember which one would be. And as you saw, fancy screens there. Now our pilot can descend down the ladder, see the debris rolling off in the distance, and fairly soon we can get our engineer out on UVA as well. There we go. And we can do the only thing we have to do on the surface, since there is no surface experiments this early in the game, so we can just deploy a flag. And immediately reboard. And just checking the life support there, which still looks good. And getting the engineer back on board. And, I realized that I had accidentally left the command pod on on a collision course with a surface, so I can quickly raise our orbit and also adjust it so that we pass over the landing site. And we can then horribly botch this takeoff. So far, it's going pretty good. Then I realize I forgot to set to orbit. Well, I went to set to surface, but I actually set it to orbit. So we actually need to start burning the wrong way. For now, on a rush rate orbit. I'll try and correct, and I'll correct it too far, and actually start burning towards the surface again. Not ideal. But yeah, this thing is just extremely overbuilt, so we have plenty of delta V to spare. Now we can adjust our inclination a bit to make sure it lines up. And then we can plot our maneuver to insert into orbit, and get a nice close encounter with the command pod. And we're actually able to get a close encounter fairly quickly without having to do more maneuvers. And there we go, fairly quick maneuver. And then we can dock. And the rest of the rendezvous was as standard, so I didn't feel like showing it. There we go. And we can now transfer crew back to the command module. And now plot our maneuver back to Kerbal. I just struggle a bit to get this maneuver, but soon enough I'd figure out where exactly we need to be to encounter Kerbal fairly quickly. This would actually be the longest part of the mission. I saw there briefly a close encounter with Kerbal in just 2 days. So just that, so we don't collide with Kerbal, and we can then conduct that maneuver, if I'm going to use the correct word. And I'll also remember to again readjust the thrust limiter. There we go. And once that burn is complete, we can do some final adjustments with RCS. And again, make sure our periapsis is at the correct height. It's aimed for about 30 to 40 kilometers. And now we can approach Kerbal. And yeah, there's not really much else left to do in the mission. And we can adjust in the service module and the lander. I kept it attached for some additional living space. And now re-entry is fairly standard. There's definitely a pretty stark contrast between the old graphics of the command mod and the new visuals of re-entry from Firefly. I guess I can give my closing thoughts on these parts. I'd never realized just how drastically the art style of Kerbal Space Program changed over the years. And well, here for that is my view of that has definitely altered my restock, which does make the change seem more drastic. I guess so if you don't have restock. And there's plenty of parts that still fit with this type of art style. And there's a bunch of parts that quite literally never got revised after the first edition, mainly heat shields and parachutes, I believe. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed. I want to thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and goodbye.